Kerusha, thank you so much for making time to share your insights into the future of leadership. But before we go into leadership, can you tell us a little bit more about your own background? Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Westville, which is a suburb in Durban, in the province of KwaZulu-Natal. I had a very suburban upbringing, small town, went to all the schools in that town, and very focused family life.
And tell us, what was your dream career as you grew up?
I think I started off wanting to be in forensics, and that evolved into wanting a career in law. So for as long as I can remember, definitely the legal field, and I'm glad I ended up in it. At one point, I wanted to become an advocate, to become the public prosecutor. But yes, I think I've always wanted to pursue a career in law, and I'm glad I did.
So where did you go from law? Where next did you go to?
So I first ended up in the world of football. My specialty is labor law, so that's employment and everything to do with labor. And when I was introduced into the world of football, which is a very niche market in the South African sphere, so it includes labor as well as commercial law. But obviously there are nuances that you can only learn with experience within the sphere of football. So that was really interesting, and that formed the start of my career. And from there, I decided to focus on my labor when I started my own consulting firm.
Right. And then how did you get into media?
I got into media, so there was a parallel kind of part of my life that was always running from the start of my career. I joined a modeling agency when I was quite young to make a little bit of money while I was in varsity to pay for my fuel and my partying. And that kind of never went away, thankfully. And so it progressed into me getting into things like Miss SA, and doing some other modeling. And from there, I think being in the entertainment industry, as well as being a legal advisor for quite a well-known football club and obviously quite a well-known group, which was the Motsepe group, it attracted the Mia in wanting to tell my story. And so when I was given the opportunities to be profiled on Mela, which is a lifestyle program in SABC3, thereafter they were looking for presenters and approached me and said, look, you're exactly the type of person we want to bring on board. Would you be interested? So it actually came as like a surprise thing. I don't think I ever actively sought it out, but it's helped me to amalgamate my two worlds quite nicely.
And can you tell us who inspired you, especially in the early stages of your career?
Definitely a man I've never met, which was Mandela. I think when I was young, I've always grown up with a love for history, and him being a lawyer and being able to change the course of South African history and the course of all of our lives. When I say our, I refer to South Africans and indeed a lot of people around the world, because of his education and because of his background as a lawyer. I think that's where my love of law came from. So definitely him. And I continued to study him throughout my life, well into varsity and his life, etc. And then a person that I do know, and I was very lucky to be mentored by, and I actively sought him out, was Patrice Motsepe, also a lawyer, background in law, self-made, one of the wealthiest men in Africa, and probably one of the biggest philanthropists in Africa. And I was able to work under him and be mentored by him. So he definitely inspired me.
And looking back over your career, would you say there was a turning point where things could have
100%.
gone? Okay.
Yeah, 100%. So it was definitely my appointment to Sundowns as a legal advisor. I think being in that space as a female, so not a lot of people acknowledge female presence within the football industry. I think football clubs will have administrative people that are female, but never within the legal sphere. So being A, young, B, a person in a very male-dominated industry and working with males that already have an assumption that you don't know what you're talking about or you don't know what you're doing, that kind of drove and pushed me to be excellent, because excellence is something no one can take from you. And my experience there then helped me to realize how much I want to help women within the corporate space, which is why that's my focus when I went out on my own and consulting within the labor space for different companies. And I also consult with individuals and small groups. And my focus is on women and wanting to help them in the corporate space.
And can you tell us what is driving you today?
I think it stems from what I've just said, which is wanting to help people. But more than that, what drives me is the more I experience life, the more I come to the realization of how many people live entire lives without the simple opportunities I was afforded just being born into the family I was born into. And so it's my duty to do the best with what this life has given me. That definitely drives me.
Now, Kerusha, let's talk about leadership. And I know it's a big question, but I have to ask you, what does the future of leadership mean to you?
For me, the future of leadership is a place where our leaders are tangible. And when I say tangible, I mean accessible, real, relatable. And B, where our leaders are accountable. I think coming off the back of what we've just come out of in terms of our leadership, I mean, I think it took an innumerable amount of people and sacrifice to build what we had, and the level and quality of leadership that we started off our democracy with was so great. And to think in these last 20-something years, we've really fallen short of what we should be producing in terms of leadership. So I think in the next 20 years, what I want to see is a return to that, a return to a great quality of leadership, a leadership that has respect for their position, has accountability, has transparency, and definitely is relatable.
And tell us, Kerusha, what have you learned from your own journey that you consider most important for building future leaders?
I think the lesson from my journey that future leaders need to learn is that integrity will stand the test of time. In the industry that I am in and I've worked in, I've seen a lot of people give up integrity in order to get ahead, but it always ends up coming back to them. And I think for me, the most important thing for any leader is to learn the value of integrity early so that sees them through.
Right. And tell us, when you speak to aspiring leaders, what is it that you tell them they should focus on for future-proofing their career?
Future-proofing, that's a very cool concept. I think in order to future-proof your career, you must not work, you must not work or seek to work for today. So not just for a salary or for a job, you must seek to work toward a legacy that can exist can exist long after you stop working, and maybe even long after you stop living. I think that's definitely the key thing. Build and do something every day that attributes to your legacy.
Now, Kerusha, let us talk about technology. In this world, as technology is accelerating at an exponential scale, what would you say are the tools of technology that you envisage should be driving and will be driving the future of leadership?
I think the big conversation now is around globalization and us coming together as a globe, as a world. And I mean, countries and continents are now implementing things that allow them to facilitate trade together so that they can be bigger powers. We see that within our own continent of Africanization and wanting to increase trade and wanting to come towards one currency. And I think more than that, the world is going to come together to be able to meet each other on the same levels. So the conversation now is really about cryptocurrencies and things like blockchain technology that will enable us to kind of eliminate the barriers, things like currency and different trades, in order to be on the same level and in order to globalize us. So I think those are the things that will definitely be key in technology in terms of the future.
And when you speak to aspiring leaders, what do you tell them about social media, and particularly how they should go about using social media to build their own brands?
That's a tricky question because obviously the first thing that comes to mind is the Trump campaign and Facebook, which obviously is the wrong way to go about using social media to help or aid somebody's cause to leadership. I think in that way, social media needs to become more transparent and more accountable. But for a leader that wants to use social media as a tool, I think the best way is to not only market themselves, but to be super as interactive as possible. I think people will use and look to social media as a way of reaching out to somebody and getting almost immediate answers or immediate responses. And a lot of leaders lack the interaction and accountability. If we take our own parties, for example, in our country, if you go onto social media and try and interact directly with them, you'll find that you're coming up against recorded responses or tested responses, and it's difficult to find that audience with them. So I think definitely if leaders want to be more proactive with their followers and using social media, they need to be open to real and live interaction.
Now, Kerusha, you've been mentored by one of the greatest business persons in the country. Can you maybe share with us a story or two where you mentored somebody or you influenced somebody and that person took your advice to heart?
I actually have quite a few stories like that. So within my role as project manager for the CSI for one of the CSIs within the Motepe group, and now as well, I mentor young women. And a lot of women have come to me not being able to speak in public or to voice their opinion in a public forum, and to see some women now conduct radio interviews, conduct interviews on public forums such as television is incredible. And to think that I was a part of that, yes, I think that's, for me, that is the tangible part of what I do. To meet somebody and they are so introspective, cannot even bring themselves to speak in a room of 5 people, but now can beautifully conduct radio interviews and public interviews. That's glorious to me, as well as women with self-confidence issues, and to see how far they have come. That's wonderful. And of course, interviews. I prep people for corporate interviews, help them to put together their CVs, help them to know what a corporate interview is going to be like, and prep them for it, and to see them get the jobs that they want to get. That's also been incredible.
Okay. Now, Kerusha, can you tell us who are the role models of leadership that you would recommend future leaders should study and learn from?
Role models of leadership within South Africa or the world?
In the world.
In the world.
And you're most welcome to start with, obviously, South African leaders, if you wish.
Yes. I think, you know, this is a tricky question for me, because role model is always quite difficult, because when people look for a role model, they don't necessarily take aspects or features of the person and want to apply it, you know, respectively to their life. They look at the person kind of holistically and then judge, which is not always the best strategy. Because, for example, a lot of people take issue with applying Mandela's leadership in today's age because of how different the issues that we face are. And, for example, applying the leadership quality of inclusiveness and of trying to appease everybody in this situation isn't necessarily going to work with some of the issues that we're currently facing. Having said that, I think his overall leadership approach of being forward-thinking and taking things that people already love and using that to unite people, such as his brilliance of taking the Rugby World Cup and not changing the colors, even though some people called for him to change the national colors, and not changing certain things, knowing that would unite so many people, and then obviously the winning of that, and how it brought us together at that time. So there are certain things that I think people need to look at from certain people, and apply, and lose this thought that we need to look at people holistically and then say, oh, okay, I want to mirror this person's entire life or not. But I think for me, the biggest female leadership that at the moment that I could think of in the country are people like Madonsela, who have whistleblown and stood against so much corruption, and more than that, stood against backlash from within her own ranks, which takes a lot. You know, and I think that's what we need to see more and more in leadership. That no matter how strong the tide may be, we need leaders that are going to stand for what is right, even if it means going against their own organizations.
Right. Now, Kerusha, how can our listeners connect with you, and where should they follow you?
all my social media accounts are at Kerusha Kylie. On LinkedIn, it's my full name, Kerusha Kylie. On Kerusha Kylie Govender. On Facebook, Kerusha Kylie Govender. My website, Kerusha Kylie, is in the making and should be up soon.
Right. And last but not least, Kerusha, is there one thing that you would really like to advise future leaders to take to heart and implement in their own leadership?
I think future leaders need to, as I've said before, really develop qualities of integrity and ethics within the sphere that they operate from. And more than wanting to be a leader up front, so i.e. a leader with a title, CEO, director, etc. The leadership should start from the back. They should want to get to know who their people are, want to get to know who their target market is, want to get to know the people that they're driving content or their consumers. And when I say want to get to know, truly understand and be a part of that before they want to lead from an unattached position. I think that will then future-proof, I like that word, future-proof leadership for them. And more than that, ensure success, because I think a lot of people miss the step or want to jump over the step straight into the position in the biggest boardroom or the biggest corner office, and miss the step of making sure that they understand the roots of their business and of their people and of their consumers, and staying in touch with that.
Well, Kerusha, thank you so much for sharing your insights and wisdom into this difficult subject and into the future. And thank you for reminding us that integrity and legacy are key components of leadership, and probably more important today than ever.
100%. Thank you so much, Dr. Nick. It has been such a pleasure.